everybody. Okay. Remember our motivation, why we're here, to listen to Buddha's teachings, think about their meaning, so we can use some tools to help us become these marvelous people that Buddha says we've got the potential to be. So we should get so excited, so then we can help others with enormous enthusiasm and never giving up. That's the plan. Okie dokie. So, do we have floods of questions since I left or not?
Not floods of questions, but a couple quite profound ones. So one from Deb Glavak about, is there any karmic seed that cannot be purified?
If there were not, the whole of Buddhism collapses into a heap of complete and total rubbish. Nothing could be empty of inherent existence, nothing would be impermanent, and it would be a disaster. It's a nightmare. No, not possible. It's like a joke to say that. Not possible. If we understand even impermanence alone is enough to understand. Forget even about emptiness. This is the whole point, There's nothing that can't be changed. There's nothing that can't be changed. This is the whole point. I mean, this is the point. If you hear the words, if you hear that, remember we started, the word Buddha, we can rid the mind utterly of all delusions, which are the cause of suffering. So that implies there's nothing that you can't change. Next.
Then how would we know if something is purified or not? Otherwise, we kind of like have a doubt come back again and again.
You have to understand the process logically. So how would you know if you're practicing the piano? If you're practicing the piano, you would never say, how do I know when I've achieved it? How would I know I've achieved it? How would I know when I've prayed, when I no longer make a mistake? If you didn't, then you obviously don't know. If you didn't know, then obviously you haven't achieved it. So wisdom is common sense. But the point about a purification, this practice, what it's doing is not removing the seeds altogether. You've got to realize emptiness to do that. And of course that sounds abstract to us because we don't understand that. It has no logic for us. What it means is, it's only when purification is gradually changing our habits. There's different things. There's seeds in the mind. It's a really simple analogy. There are seeds in the mind. Tendons, which is a tendency to do something. A tendency to do a negative action. So there's two things. There's the state of mind, say the anger, the wish to kill. They're the things that are there now. And then there's the imprints in the mind from the past, from having had the anger and having done the killing. So when you do the regret of the 4 steps, you're regretting the fact that you killed. Already that's weakening the tendency to kill because you don't want suffering. Then you have compassion that strengthens that. Then you do the practice. And that's a powerful visualization. And it's the mind, the more powerfully you do it, the more you weaken that tendency. And then the 4th one is you vow not to do it again. So every day you vow not to do it again, and then you watch your mind and your body and your speech like a hawk. At the end of the day, you regret it again. And so you're digging this new groove in your mind, this new habit to not kill, and you're weakening the tendency to kill. So, and then eventually, when you've really perfected your behavior, there's levels of practice. Junior school level is where you change your actual behavior. You change, and then the next level you change your mind, and then you develop compassion, and all the time you're growing, moving away from killing and anger, etc., and you're moving towards love and compassion and towards wisdom, and then it grows and grows and grows and grows until eventually it's effortless. And then eventually, when you've got single point of concentration and you're able to get to the subtlest level of the mind, and with that subtle level of mind, you're able to see with crystal clarity, and that there never has been, isn't, and never could be this intrinsic I, which is the belief in which is the source of all the problems in the entire universe, all the things that we do wrong, all the negative actions, all the negative tendencies, all the habits. When that's cut, when you cut the final misconception, by now you've cut the habit of attachment, you've cut the habit of anger, you've cut the habit of jealousy, you've controlled the actions that our body and speech do on the basis of those, so you're controlling those. So you're constantly it's an ongoing process of getting less angry, more kind, more compassionate, more wise, until eventually it's effortless. And then finally, you even develop bodhicitta, which is beyond belief. And then finally, you cut the root of all the nonsense. And once you've cut the root, then you can't fall back after that. And eventually you've perfected that realization, and then all the delusions are gone, all the imprints are gone, all the negativity is gone. It's a gradual process of knowing no music to the point where you've perfected the music. It's learning something, growing in something. So it's slowly. So it's like you're putting atomic bombs. The purification is putting atomic bombs under the seeds you've already planted and weakening those tendencies. And then every day you get better and better at that, and every day. So until eventually you've perfected your mind. And then it's all gone, nothing left. Gradually. You can even lose bodhicitta. This is outrageous. I mean, we've hardly talked much about that. I always say that. I seem to always spend time on the wisdom wing. But the compassion wing is incredible, the levels to which we can accomplish such unbelievable empathy and courage to be of benefit to others based on wisdom. This is unbelievable. We can even still lose that until we've got to certain levels of realization. But once we've realized emptiness, once we've cut the root of all the delusions, you can't lose that after all. That's finished. In other words, all these delusions are beginningless, but once it's a bit like the egg and the chicken and the egg. If you see an egg, you know it came from a chicken. If you see a chicken, you know it came from an egg. But you can break the egg anytime you like, and you can never get another chicken. Well, that's what the Buddha has found about all the delusions, all the nonsense, all the misconceptions, all the karmic imprints. They are not set in stone. They can be utterly and completely annihilated from the mind. And why? Is because they're misconceptions. Of course, it sounds abstract to us. We have to understand all that. When you've cut all the misconceptions, you have wisdom. You see things as they are. Mistakes finished. Perfection achieved. Something like that.
There's a following on question from Alicia about emptiness from last week when we were talking about emptiness, and you mentioned seeing the absence of, say, $500 in our wallet. It's an absence of something.
Yes, good.
So we're trying to see an absence of the self or an alternative self.
Okay, I understand. It's a fine point, and like all of these things, we've got to learn the words first. You learn the theory first. You learn the language first. Then slowly the penny drops, you know. The essential point the Buddha is making about all these delusions, all the neuroses in the mind, is they've got this particular function. It's their crucial function, is that they are literally misconceptions. They are misconceptions. They're thoughts, they're conceptual thoughts, but they are not valid thoughts. So anger, attachment, jealousy, all the emotional ones that have this added component of having emotion linked to them because they're so habitual. So they're all misconceptions. Buddha says our mind now are riddled with misconceptions. Of course, we don't have to believe him. A Christian will tell us also that our mind has got a misconception if we don't have a view of a creator. And the scientists will tell us that we've got a misconception if we think there's past lives. And they will tell us we think there's a misconception if we believe in a God. So it's up to us to look into all these things and take them out as our working hypothesis. We can't just believe and not believe just to be comfortable. We've got to see what is true and what is not. So the point that the Buddha's making is all these delusions, all these disturbing emotions that we know very well, that are rooted in fear and unhappiness, they at their core, they are conceptual states of mind, they're deeply habitual, and they're liars. They are misconceptions. They cause us to believe in things that don't exist. That's why they're called delusions. I mean, when you're called delusional, you're very offended because someone's telling you not in touch with reality. Well, this is exactly what Buddha's saying. I mean, it's a total surprise to us because who thinks they're not in touch with reality? We don't even think like that. We believe in anger's story. We believe in attachment story. We really believe that cake is the cause of my happiness. And it looks divine. It looks divine out there. It looks like this. It appears this way. So the Buddha's saying all these mistakes, believing in things that don't exist, basically, are so deeply ingrained for eons, he says, that even things now appear this way. Like, in other words, you've got a $5 note, but you believe for so long that's 500. You really believe it appears like 500. You believed in it for so long, you just completely utterly it's just truth for you. So what's going to happen every time you go to spend it, because you're over exaggerating its value, and this is a really good way to put out the delusions. They over exaggerate, they distort, they over exaggerate. So in this case, you over-exaggerate the value of that 5. You over-exaggerate what it can do for you. You believe in it, get all excited, all anticipating. You spend it, and you only get $5 worth. So every time it happens, you get disappointed. Well, that's every time what happens when we have a cake. The attachment is so habitual, and it's even we know about it, but still we fall into the trap because it's so deeply ingrained in our mind. We believe the cake is delicious in its own side. We believe it's the cause of happiness. We believe it's got nothing to do with me. This is how deep our delusions are. So the deepest delusion, the deepest lie, the deepest misconception, the one that underpins all the others, therefore the hardest to remove, therefore the hardest to recognize, is the intrinsic me. Of course it sounds abstract. An intrinsic me? What are you talking about, an intrinsic me? Whoever thought they had an intrinsic me, you know? But this is what Buddha's saying. So as Lama Zopa says, all these delusions, what they do is they decorate on top of what is there, layers upon layers upon layers of characteristics that just aren't there. In other words, the belief in $500 just doesn't exist there. So this is how Buddha says we're living in La La Land. But and even when we hear this, we think, oh, isn't that cute? Isn't that nice? But we really believe we're just ordinary, real people. Cake will make us happy, and chocolate cake will make me happy, and carrot cake makes me unhappy. Fred is delicious. Mary is ugly. We just go around with all these stories, never questioning our misconceptions, not even knowing we have a misconception, because the deepest lie, the one of ego grasping, the ignorance, the deepest one, makes everything appear as if it's out there. So we know attachment exaggerates the deliciousness of Fred when you're in love with him. And we know that because when you're un in love with him, he looks disgusting. So you thought, God, what happened to that, you know? So we know it's a lie. But what we don't see, the biggest lie of all, is we don't see that this ego grasping causes everything to be completely disconnected from us, to be completely out there in itself, having nothing to do with me as the observer, where this individual, separate, intrinsic here, me, and this delicious cake over there. This is how the world appears to us. I mean, Lama Yeshe would say we're schizophrenic. People are insulted by that, but it's a really good way of putting it. It's a really fancy word for being dualistic. That there's me here, separate from everything over there. And this ego grasping is the cause of that. And that's why we have a separation from people. When you're overwhelmed by attachment and anger, when a person is depressed or angry, have a look at you. Look at how you feel. The world is this distant thing out there. And it looks, when you're depressed or angry, it looks ugly and despairing and horrible, and you've got this sense of an absolute, concrete, unmovable me. It's so clear, we have it, we know it. But then when you're a bit more flexible, when you're less neurotic and a bit more kind and loving and empathetic, there's a sense of connectedness with the world. This is exactly the indicator that the ignorance is slightly less. When it's more, you're separate, bereft, lonely, concrete. When it's less, you're more connected, more easygoing, more flexible, you know. So we have to first start by controlling the servants of the delusions. Then you start to work on the delusions themselves. Then you add compassion to the mix. And by now we're this amazing person. And now we get single point of concentration, and we can access the microscope of our mind, basically, because it's only with the microscope of our mind that we can see the deepest lie. It's so hard to see it. It's so utterly, our mind is imbued with it, you know. So only when we've got single point of concentration, having done all the past work of junior school, high school and university, having trained our minds and disciplined our minds and worked and meditated and really developed to an incredible degree, now it's easy peasy to get to the subtle level, and you can deconstruct based on logic. And then when you get to the subtle level, based on the logic you've used to argue with all these lies, and particularly this deepest lie, then you see at some point there'll be a moment when at some point finally you will see with absolute crystal certainty that there never has been, isn't, and never could be that kind of fantasy I that appears to be intrinsic, that appears to be living in it, in existing in itself, that appears to exist from its own side, that appears to be absolute. You'll realize with certainty your mistake. You will see the mistake. It's like you finally realize one day that is $5. You see first, but you see the absence of the $500 first. You see the mistake. All these years you've been believing it's $500. So the thing that you'll realize is the absence of that $500 on that $5 note. And then you'll see the truth that it's actually $5. Then you've cut the root. Finally, the seeing the truth has annihilated the lie. And now you can't fall back under that. After that, you can only go forward. I forgot the question, but I hope that answered it.
No, that did. Thank you very much. Okay. There's a similar, so instead of the layering things on top, then there's also the being in denial about things, like people are in denial about COVID, or that it won't happen to me, or not social distancing, and so we don't believe it, and yet we still get the consequences. So how can we have this, it's so difficult with that time lag of what we do and the consequences, you know, like 2 weeks later, we can't even get our head around that, let alone the next lifetime.
So I'm a bit lost. Say the question again.
So with COVID, for instance, when we're denying the reality of COVID or not wearing face masks or social distancing.
So, so what we're saying is There is a reality, and it's called COVID-19, and there are certain things that they say will lessen the possibility of getting it, which is wearing a mask. Okay, so what you're saying is there are people who say, don't be talking nonsense. That is not true.
Yeah, or that COVID is not true.
Yes,
so in total
so that's not
denial.
true.
Because
so what's the question then?
So, but then 2 weeks later you get sick, but then it's too late, isn't it? So there's this time lag that makes it so hard for us to put it cause and effect together. And karma's like the ultimate time lag because it goes over lifetimes, you know, because so many people...
I can't quite get the question. I'm so sorry, Miffy. Just say the question.
So because so many people, for instance, cheat others and whatever and get a short-term benefit.
So we do all the wrong things. We really believe that killing will make... I'm angry with somebody and then I cause myself to believe that if I kill them, I've solved the problem. So what you're saying is it's hard to see how that's not true. You're absolutely right. So what's the question? What's the question? I understand. That's right. Yes. So what's the question?
Well, how on earth do we start getting our head around that?
Well, we've got to start to find somebody who can have confidence in, who maybe we can... In other words, if you really believe that there's no law of botany, there's never heard of botany, you really don't know there's such a law, you've never heard of such a thing, and at some point somebody didn't know the law of botany, but clever people have come along, have used their noggin, have observed things that grow, have come up with the laws, have codified them and then presented them, and then we prove it by putting the veggies in the ground and it grows into a vegetable. So we can prove it. So if you don't even know there's such a thing of botany, which is really what we're saying here. One of the ignorances we have, the Buddha would say, is why the bodhisattvas have such compassion for us, because we don't have any sense of this view of cause and effect, that everything we think and do and say brings our own results. So this is the worst. I mean, forget about ignorance of emptiness, but ignorance of even of cause and effect. This is the reason we all suffer. This is exactly what Buddha's saying. So this is a really tough one. This is not an easy one to say. It is not. It's impossible to see it right now. Whoever thinks they've got a past life, nobody. So whoever thinks there's a past life, whoever thinks, even the view that, we are so addicted to the view that if I'm seen to be naughty, then I'll get punished. But if no one sees me lie, I get away with it. We really believe that as a philosophy. That's like thinking because your doctor doesn't see you eat sugar, you won't get diabetes. I mean, that's just plain insanity. That's how idiotic we are. And this is intelligent people think this. Super genius, intelligent people think this. So this is why the cause and effect one is outrageous teaching. It's an outrageous teaching. So what are you going to do with it? All we can do, if we have an interest in knowing why things happen, if we have an interest in understanding suffering and its causes, we might, we seem to stumble along the Buddhist view. Some of us hear it and think it's a complete load of rubbish and won't listen again. Other people will continue with it, like some of us. Here we are, plodding along, trying to get our head around cause and effect, still without clairvoyance. We can't possibly see it's true. And that's a point that, Wolfgang is saying. But the point is, even if we begin to, that's why it seems to me, all we can do is look into things. And then, and then that means to look into it seriously, not just vaguely. So, and that means it takes many years of work. You can't just look into Buddhism and say, oh, well, I don't think it's a load of rubbish. You can't just listen to this idea that a seed will bring a fruit and say, oh, no, that's a silly idea and goodbye. You've got to spend years studying botany. And that's the point of the Wolfgang. How can you prove? Is it been proved? You've got to find out. You've got to be for the long haul here. So that's why the first level of practice has to be, like any body of knowledge, you've got to take it as your working hypothesis. You've got to be prepared to open your mind to the possibility. So if you're really in a hurry to prove it, and that's a good thing, go get some single point of concentration, because when you've accessed your subtle level of mind, you will have clairvoyance, and that's in the teachings. But even to do that, it's like catch-22. You've got to hypothesize the possibility that your mind is in the brain, and you've got to hypothesize the possibility that you can access a subtle level, and you've got to hypothesize the possibility that means you can see the past and the future. So it's like catch-22 in a way. You've got to start with a hypothesis. You've got to then check out the sources. You've got to listen to the teachings, look at the Buddha's teachings, look at the Dalai Lama, look at valid examples of these teachings. So it's a pretty big thing to get into. And then you just have to start acting as if. But you've got to practice one step at a time. And then if you really want to get single point of concentration, you've got to give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I'm sorry, Wolfgang, you've got to give up your wife and your 47 children, give up your job, give up everything, and go to the mountains and get some discipline and get single point of concentration. Then you can prove karma's true, because that's the point. But that's in the literature. But, that's why, for me, it seems important, Because we live at a conceptual level. We live at a conceptual level. So that's why I like to say very strongly, if there's any body of knowledge, whether it's acupuncture, whether it's music, or whether it's Buddhism, worldview, if it is a valid body of knowledge, this is a crucial point, if it is a valid body of knowledge, it first must be coherent conceptually, theoretically. And that takes masses of brain power just I mean, the monasteries, the Tibetan Buddhist monastic, the Tibetan monastic university system, they study a minimum of 20 years. Western people are doing it now. The first geshe, the first female geshe, Western female geshe, graduated a few years ago. She did 19 years of intensive study of all this body of knowledge that's tracking itself back to a couple of thousand years, you know. So she passed. So then this is where you study all this knowledge. Every word I'm saying in this room is coming from that body of knowledge, right? And so you study all that, and then you've got to prove first intellectually that it's coherent. Intellectually, you could pass an exam in acupuncture, and you could prove perfectly every meridian, everything, without having put a needle in anybody. You could do that if it were a valid body of knowledge. So it takes a lot of work. Now, most of us, and this is the Buddhist explanation of it, we jump into Buddhism, we recognize it because we've done it before. We like it. And often we conflate liking it with knowing it. Well, liking it isn't enough. It'll run out unless you study it and stick it into your brain, you know, because next life you won't bother anymore. So that's why we've got to study it and get our head around it first intellectually and take it as our hypothesis. Every piece of knowledge, Wolfgang, is that. We just think, you know, I mean, if you're saying, oh, acupuncture, you've never heard of acupuncture, what a load of rubbish. Sticking needles in people heals people? Who are you trying to kid? Because it's not our culture. But the only way to start looking into it, this is interesting, they talk about in the text how you go through this process from all the way from wrong view to wisdom. So this could be with acupuncture, exactly the same. Let's say it's 1940s and we've never heard of these weird Chinese people, and you're living in San Jose and you hear about somebody sticking needles in somebody. You think, first of all, the first thing is you have is wrong view. Don't be ridiculous. We're taking the assumption here that acupuncture is right. But your first view of it, because you've never heard of it before, because the views in your mind right now are completely different views. They're all about allopathic. That's what you've been brought up with, and that's what your view is. It's the only thing that's true. So you hear it first, you go, what a load of rubbish. But then you think you've got a little bit of an intelligent mind, so you keep listening, you keep checking. Then you go, oh, and you now go towards doubt, tending towards the wrong view. So you go and you keep studying it, you keep looking and checking, and you start to think, well, that's interesting, maybe it is right. No, it can't be right. But you keep looking, you keep checking, and now you gradually move your mind towards doubt, tending towards the right view. So you start to get more confidence, but you're looking into it, not just believing it because you like the sound of it. You're using your noggin already. And slowly, your doubt moves towards what they call correct belief. And that's really confident. And then you even more work, even more profound analysis and work. All the dots are joining, all the map is starting to fall into place, all the bits of the piece of the puzzle are coming together, and now you have intellectual certainty. They call it conceptual, what do they call it? I can't think of it. Intellectual certainty, anyway. So you're certain. And you could even pass an exam on acupuncture, but you've never stuck a needle in yet. But it's only when you start to put the needles in when you know it's true. And the same thing could be for any body of knowledge whatsoever. And there's no shortcut. That's how you would study acupuncture. That's how you would study relativity. That's how you would study anything, any body of knowledge on the planet. You've got to make it your experience, and there's no shortcut. So much of it is having confidence based on theory. You can't do anything else. There's no other way to do it, you know. So one step at a time. And as Dalai Lama says, if you move along like this, and at some point from your own experience, you prove Buddha's wrong, then of course you would reject him. That's what Buddha did with the Hindus. He went as far as he could go in that incredible system that existed back then. These geniuses, you know, we have no knowledge of these people. We love the Greeks. We go back to the Greeks, don't we? We know nothing about Indians. These incredible beings at that point. Unbelievably highly sophisticated, you know, ethicists and great practitioners. They accomplished, they're the ones who created single point of concentration, which is sort of a living technique. Right now, alive, people doing it right this minute. Incredible. He went as far as he could go with that, but he diverged in his own direction because he felt they hadn't finished the job. There was still left, there was an intrinsic self still left. You hadn't finished the job, he thought. So he kept moving. That's all we can do. We don't have any choice. But have confidence at an intellectual level. Use our intelligence. Use our noggin. That's not just like it. It's not enough. But it takes a lot to hypothesize all this. Of course, it's huge. What can I do?
So, Venerable, there's a question from Uri, who's fairly new and is trying to get his head around emptiness, and at first thought it sounded a bit like everything everything comes from nothing and ends up in nothing.
So the word emptiness.
So he's kind of asking, where does emptiness originate, and is there anything beyond it?
Originate. I need to get him to tell me what he thinks. Speak to me. Where is he?
Let me find him.
Originates.
Yes, so...
Originates.
And where does the phenomena of emptiness originate from, I suppose? Or we could even ask...
Where is he? I need to talk to him.
Uri, I've unmuted you. You can ask...
Oh, hi.
Where are you?
Yes.
Who is it? Uri? Is Uri, is it?
Uri, yes.
Okay,
I've just
talk
asked
to me,
him.
Uri. So,
Uri.
But first of all, tell me what you think emptiness means, because we should get that clear first. What do you think it means based on what you've heard?
I think it's a phenomena.
You're right, it is a phenomenon.
It's some sort of structure of phenomena.
It is a way... Okay, it's a way of presenting how things exist. But the crucial thing is, Uri, we've got to get our head around the word emptiness. So let's call it something else. There's a way, you see, the Buddha talks about... There are two ways that things exist. And this is one good way of presenting this idea. One way is like an affirmative way, a conventional way. Things exist as a conventional, things have a conventional nature, and things have this ultimate nature, and that's presenting it in this negating kind of way, which sounds really abstract to us, and it's a very specific thing, and we can really misunderstand it. So that the affirming way of saying how everything exists is simply the term dependent arising, interdependence, that everything exists interdependently. And it sounds kind of cute, but it's got a highly sophisticated meaning. So why is Buddha telling us this? Because he says at the moment, caught up in misery and delusions and negativity and anger and upset and wishing to kill and lie and steal and harming, completely delusional, these are the voices of ego, and they are the ones that are completely demented. And when we analyze the way they make us act and feel, we can see that they cause us to feel this weird sense of a separate, lonely, bereft, concrete, solid me, and ugly, horrible, delicious, or whatever it is out there. This complete separation between us and ourself, us and reality. So in other words, the ego-grasping view, which doesn't understand this ultimate way of things existing, that doesn't understand that everything's interdependent, thinks the very opposite. Everything's concrete, set in stone, and the more we're caught up in that ignorance, the more demented we are, the more mad we are, the more insane and suffering and crazy, and the more we harm others. So loosening the grip of that, grasping everything as having a solid entity, we first control our body and speech, then begin to control our mind. We're loosening it, weakening it, and we're becoming a more holistic, more integrated, more connected, more contented human being. And eventually, even with compassion, we become incredibly interconnected with others. So all of that is proving, and you can prove it yourself. When you're angry and lonely and jealous, look how you feel, set in stone. The whole world is out there, it's horrible. There's poor, pathetic you there. But if you're more loving and kind, the mind is more integrated, you're more connected, you're more easygoing, you can see that everything's interconnected, and you connect with others. So that's a proof that the virtuous states of mind are connected to interdependence, and the deluded states of mind are rooted in the opposite, which is a fantasy. Nothing exists like the way we think it does. So as we finally get to the point of uprooting the rubbish, quote unquote, realizing emptiness, what that means is emptiness means that the I we thought was there, the way we thought the world was, doesn't exist like that. So it's like you finally discovered that $5 note doesn't exist as $500. So you realize the absence of the $500 value on the $5 value. So the absence, seeing the mistake first, then you see the reality. So you realize the absence of the fantasy I that's been causing you to believe for so long in all this nonsense. When you finally see that truth naked, that there never has been, isn't, and never could be that I, and that's seeing the emptiness of that I, you then see the reality of the interdependent I, the reality of everything that exists interdependently. That's a way of saying it. So, okay, question now.
Isn't that a lot to take in?
Petal, what do you want for nothing? You want to become a Buddha, baby. You want to get your bloody mind to pervade the universe, to see millions of the minds of all beings, to understand past, present, and future, and to have infinite compassion for all of them, and manifest your mind in 1 trillion bodies to benefit them all for a few eons. That is a lot to take in, but one step at a time, precious. Yeah. We're talking here advanced levels. Everything that we're describing now leads to this one. It's a big deal. Buddha says the delusions are so rampant and so deep, it needs lots of chipping away at it. It's not just a question of doing it overnight. Because he says the depth of our ignorance about every level of reality is quite profound. So it takes a while to unpack and unravel this stuff.
And
Just a minute. Wait. Uri's got more to say. Go on. What do you want to say? Was that enough for now?
Venerable,
Wait a minute. I'm waiting for Uri. He hasn't finished.
Uri?
Or is he maybe finished?
Thank you. You explained it very well. Thank you.
Oh, it's enough for now for Uri. Okay.
Thank you.
One step at a time, babe. I mean, if it interests you.
Yeah,
maybe it doesn't
you.
Maybe it's boring. That's up to you to decide, okay?
Yes. Thank you very much.
All right, sweetheart.
So, Venerable, when you talked about karma as being like botany, you know, and understanding about botany, so then we could have this question, so where does botany come from? I mean, that's this kind of question.
I know that, but you've got to unpack that question for me, please. What do you mean come from? What do you mean by that question? I'm sorry. It's a good question, but unpack it a bit more.
Well, isn't it it's almost like an intellectual kind of addiction to figure out where does this come from? Where did it start, or why did it start?
But that's a meaningless question. It's a wrong question. What do you mean by that? Okay, put it this way. This is what natural law is, okay, isn't it? As long as this universe has been here, as far as we've heard from history and things, there have been things growing. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
It's just the coming together of a series of conditions, and that's just the universe. It's the way it is. It's just the way it is, isn't it? Would you agree it's just the way it is? But maybe for centuries, nobody's ever understood that law. They've looked at things grow, but no one's understood why they grow. So there are two things. One is the natural law. Given the conditions of this planet, things grow. You get you've got air and gravity and this and that, and something drops into the ground and it pops up as a carrot. Okay, that's just how things are. It's not, where did it come from? Well, the universe. It's just the way the conditions of the universe. So another thing is the knowledge about it. Now, if we're Christian, as far as we're concerned, God made the carrots, made the universe, made the laws, made the rules, and they are to be believed in because he's the boss. There's no thing like that in Buddhism. So a botanist is a clever person who's observed the natural law and has articulated how it works. So botany is what it is. It's always existed. So emptiness is how things are, Buddha says. It's always how things have been. A person has to observe it. Karma is a natural law. Buddha didn't come along and create it like God and then plonk it on things that exist. Botany isn't something plonked on things that exist. Botany is a way of presenting those things that exist. That's what natural law means. And Buddha talks about natural law. He's talking has nothing to do with Buddha's law. This is what he has observed to be true. So the real point is, this is for Uri, it looks like he's gone, or maybe he's still there. But the crucial point, Uri, is one, to make all this experiential is so important. Because we can see in our world, I mean, Uri said it's a lot. Well, so is physics. So is all the genius neuroscientific views. So these amazing thinkers in our culture, in our world, the scientists. There's a lot to take in. Of course, it is years and years. But the crucial point is this that I find is necessary to understand. We get wisdom. We understand people who've got genius minds who can understand things in this planet. We can see that. Unbelievably intelligent people who understand even the meaning of the universe, whatever. But the problem is, even with that knowledge, you can still go home and beat up your husband because it hasn't affected your mind, it hasn't affected your behavior, and it's got nothing to do with ethics. That's the part that's pretty schizophrenic. And that's where the Buddhist view, the only reason to have wisdom about how things exist, the only reason to experience the truth of emptiness, if it is true, the only reason to understand the experience, to have the experience of the law of karma, if it is true, is because this will help you change and become a happy, marvelous person and stop harming others and then be able to help them. It's got to be rooted in ethics. It's got to be rooted in experience. Otherwise, it's demented. It's having a head full of knowledge so you pass your exam and then you go kill yourself. What is the point? Completely depressing. It's got to be related to ethics and happiness and suffering. Otherwise, it's just demented. But initially, it doesn't appear this way. I mean, Uri's point was very good. There's a lot to take in, whatever he said. Of course it is. But the only reason to do it is to stop suffering and get happiness and then help others. That's the only reason. There's no other reason. That's the experiential consequence of understanding emptiness, understanding karma. Taking these as our hypotheses and learning to live according to them, and then proving them to
So
be true.
Anderson James is asking about, so he's fairly new to, he's probably been at Langri Tangpa Centre less than 1 week.
Who is it?
And
Who is it? Who?
Anderson.
Hi, Anderson. Where are you? Oh, I see you, Anderson. There you go.
Is it better to consistently practice imperfectly or figure out the basic intellectual framework first and then engage in practice?
No, it's a good point, Anderson. It's a bit like, I think it is a bit like acupuncture. I mean, nobody would study acupuncture the way I said it. But the point I was making, that if it is a valid body of knowledge, you could study it intellectually and prove it to be true intellectually. That was my point. But that wouldn't be the way to study acupuncture. That wouldn't be the way to study music. You don't go and study Bach and learn to write, an orchestral piece for 57 pieces with all the brilliant, without touching a piano. It's best to do a bit of theory and then put into practice, and you grow both aspects experientially. That's really important. Both is best. But my main point why I said it before was because if it is a valid body, if that music is a valid body of knowledge, learning Bach's music, you could learn it intellectually. You could learn it intellectually and even teach somebody else, but it's missing because you haven't got the experience of it. But it's making the point that, and this is what we don't think about religion or spiritual paths, it's got to be coherent intellectually, and that should be very confidence-making. But it's best to do intellectual and then experience. Otherwise, it just becomes dry, and you give up after a while. Do you understand, Anderson? Good, okay.
Doris has a related question. Then, can the realization of emptiness ever happen when we're not in single-pointed concentration?
Only if you've had it before. Only if you've done the work before in a past life. Or in this life. Once you realize it, you can't lose it. So then you'd be out round having, talking to your girlfriend and having an apple and going to sleep. You'd never lose your realization of emptiness. You can never lose it. Even for next life. That's why that story about Lama Zopa. Did I tell you that to this teaching or somewhere else? About drowning. Did I? That was,
yes.
Okay,
yes.
That one. He was 8 years old when he was drowning, and he said, there was no fear. Because he can't, once you realize emptiness, that can never be lost, because you've cut the root of delusions. You've cut the root of suffering. So if you've realized it before, then you don't need single point of concentration to have it anymore, Doris. But you would keep practicing it because you haven't removed all the subtle delusions from the mind yet. You've got more work to do. Once from that first moment of realization, you've got more work to do, but you can't fall back after that. You can't lose that after that. What else?
Susanna Irvine is asking, given that most of us haven't got a perfect understanding of emptiness, cutting the root of all delusions, how can we ensure we'll quickly and easily meet the Dharma and a teacher again in the next life?
If karma is logical, if it is a natural law, then whatever you think and do and say will logically bring its results. So it's karma takes care, like Lama Yeshe said. So you sow all the seeds. You make sure you practice morality, that you don't kill, don't steal. You live in vows, which I said I'd talk about and I will. You live in your vows, then you do your purification, then you work on your mind, then you get some renunciation, then you practice some compassion, then you practice some wisdom, and you just keep sowing all those seeds when what else would ripen but those seeds? It's not hit and miss. You can't, it's like saying, well, how can I be certain that I'll get vegetables in 20 years? You know the answer. You know the answer and you're confident because you understand botany. So it's exactly the same here. It's not a fraction of difference. Okay, there are lots of weeds still in the ground, but that's why you've got lots of purification, living in vows, you get ahead of the game, you keep them under control, you practice lots of virtue, you program your mind, and so you'll get exactly that fruit in the future. That's the logic of the law of cause and effect, that's the logic of botany. You won't be surprised if you get oak trees and rose bushes in 20 years because you know you planted them. You're not surprised. You're not surprised if you're an architect and you just designed a 100-story building. You're not surprised each step of the way when you do it that you get a 100-story building. You're not like, oh wow, that's incredible, I got a 100-story building. You knew you would because you knew the laws. So it's like that kind of confidence in the laws. Do you understand, Susanna? It's logical. Karma takes care, as Lama Yeshe says.
And then Fernando asks, so once you realize emptiness, then you stop experiencing fear all the time?
Yes, absolutely.
Or is it just during the meditation sessions?
No, that's a load of rubbish if it's just that. How depressing. No. Once you've got the root, and then the more you perfect it, the more marvelous you become, because, you've got to keep doing more work, and there's more work to do before you become a Buddha, a lot more work to do. But from that point, You've cut the cause of having attachment. You've cut the cause of anger. You've cut the cause of all the neuroses. You've got incredible clarity. You've got incredible wisdom. You've got incredible joy. You've got more work to do, but you're already pretty stunning. And of course there's no fear, because fear, once you realize that $5 note is $5, once you realize it's not $500, with certainty, you'll never believe it's $500 again. You'll never be fooled again. So of course there's no fear. Of course, it's an insane concept for us to think there's no fear, because fear for us is the most fundamental, ordinary thing. In fact, the Buddha says the more we look into our minds, we're all living in constant fear, which is this mild level of constant panic, which is why we keep trying to get what we want to allay the panic. I mean, attachment and aversion are running the show. And once you realize emptiness, my goodness, unbelievable. You're a blissful person, extraordinary being. And you keep getting even better. All these questions, unbelievable. What else?
There is one also from a while ago from Kit about trying to get her head around the nature of consciousness and how it's different from the brain.
Yes.
And she's wondering that if, for instance, she had a brain transplant, for instance, her brain was taken out and a different brain was put in. Would that mean that she now has no consciousness with the transplanted
brain? No, it would be a different brain. You'd function differently, because the brain, if the brain is a certain way, the mind that relates, the mind that's, the brain is physical, okay? And so, you have a brain is physical. Have they done transplants of brains? Can they do that yet? No.
I don't know. If they have it certainly hasn't been successful.
No, anyway, let's just say they can do it, and I can't see a reason you can't do it. There can't logically be a reason. You're clever enough as a surgeon. Surely it would be a possibility. You wouldn't be a new person. Your mind would still be there. Because your mind doesn't just inhabit your brain. Your mind pervades your whole body. The Buddhist view is a very different one. The Tibetan medical system, which is based on this Vajrayana system, which is a very different way of presenting what a person is. Consciousness is consciousness, and that's your own unique consciousness. So a new brain, new heart, new liver, new hand, new legs, it'll still be the same consciousness. But it might function differently, because depending on, one piece of the brain mightn't be working so well, so you'll stutter or something, So it's like, but it'll still be your mind. Your mind's got nothing to do with the brain. And that sounds silly if we're neuroscientists, because we think it is the mind. It sounds hilarious to say it's got nothing to do with it. But they're separate. They're connected. They're interdependent, but they're not the same thing. So of course, if you've got a new brain, you'd be the same person. You might function differently, because you've got, different bits of physical aren't working the same way. It's still your mind. Your continuity of consciousness. Yeah.
And then, Venerable, I've got a question. So you mentioned that you're going to talk about vows. So I've always wondered, what's the importance of actually formalizing vows? Because I've always thought, if in my own mind I've made a commitment, isn't that enough?
I know the Buddha's got his own way of talking about it. The Lama and the teachers since the Buddha talk about it in a particular way. It's a bit like the way I like to think about it. For example, Lama Zopa's given me permission to give vows, layperson's vows, for example, and then refuge. So I do that job when people ask, for example. So then the way I think about it is this: when I received this permission from, I've received it's like an empowerment to do it. In a way, you don't call it that, Miffy, but I've received the permission, and I received my vows and mine from my teacher. Then they received theirs from their teacher, and they received theirs from their teacher, and they received that, and and this is the point about lineage. If that lineage is unbroken, that means you could track from me back to the Buddha in an unbroken lineage of real human beings. This is what a lineage is. This is what they talk about in empowerment in Tantra. And it's exactly the same as my mother. When my mother taught me, I find a very interesting point. My mother taught me how to make a cake. It was the first time I made a cake when I was like 25, 26. I was living in London. I was a hippie. I wanted to make a carrot cake. It was a very vivid experience for me, because I use it as an example. So the first time I decided I wanted to make a cake. So I went home. I asked my mum, please show me how to make a cake. So my mother, where did she get cake making from? And there's something powerful about the human connection is what I'm getting at. It's like a transmission into the mind. I could have read a book. I could have done any way possible. I could have learned how to make a cake. But I'll never forget that day, because it's the first time that cakes became real for me, because I got them from a human being. So I was ready. I wanted it. I checked up. She was valid. I tasted her cake. I knew she was valid. She was a knowledge holder. Rigsin in Tibetan. She told me the recipe. I listened and I made the cake. I remember the day, the cake, the kitchen, because I received this empowerment, this transmission from a human being. It's the power of the human mind. I think that's what it is. So I received my vows from my Lama. He got them from his Lama. And you can track that back to this powerful power source, right back to the Buddha. And that's the benefit of lineage, and that's the benefit of and I think it's that makes it powerful. It doesn't mean it's not powerful if you say it yourself, but there's extra power because it's a particular set of Buddhist vows, you know.
Is it like that it's a cumulative wisdom?
Well,
like,
I mean, maybe
you know,
it's that, but it just has more power. I mean, the Buddha says taking the vows. This is the thing about vows. Okay, what is a vow? We don't like the sound of a vow. It sounds like someone's squashing you to do something. But if you think about it, everything we learned, if you have to learn to drive a car, well, Miffy doesn't drive a car, so she can't say Miffy, but even though you learn to drive a car, you've got about
I have a license.
Oh, you do?
I have a license and an unblemished driving record because I've never driven.
Oh, there you go. Okay, you're like the acupuncturist who never put needles into people. So the point is this with a vow, think about it, just to learn to drive a car, look at the number of things you have to learn and internalize to not do. You've got about 100 vows. You do not put the foot on the accelerator at the same time as the brake. You do not turn the wheel left if you're going to turn right. Think of the number of things you have to learn, but we don't call them vows. We just call them learning how to drive. Everything we do, when you're playing the piano, there's 1,000 things you're not allowed to do, but you agree that you won't do them, and if you didn't know them, you wouldn't know. So that's all a vow is, and all Buddha's giving us is little 5 pathetic ones. I mean, it's just 5 little baby things. He says it can transform your mind. So the power of a vow, the Buddha would say, is this. And the vow is taken in front of somebody who represents the Buddha for you. You're on one knee, you repeat it 3 times, and you are making this powerful decision. A vow is a decision to refrain from something. A commitment, we talk about in Tibetan Buddhism, is a commitment to do something. So you've got these 5 as a layperson. Once you've taken refuge, you've got these 5 little baby vows. You decide, you say in the thing, you repeat after the person, you repeat the words. I, whose name is, from this moment until I die, will never kill, never steal, never lie. And then they say, the Buddha says, vows are so potent that they're a subtle physical form that's visible to clairvoyance. There's something so amazing. And the other point about vows, as Rinpoche points out, and this is Buddha's teaching, Lama Zopa says just being good is not enough. And there's a logical reason to it. The logical reason is this. Like we talked at the beginning a bit about karma, the crucial component in the doing of an action, which is the sowing of a dropping of a seed into your mind, the crucial piece there is your mind involved in it. So given that we need a bucket load of delicious, intentional, non-killing seeds in our bank vault before we die, so we can get another decent human body, just to forget about everything else, we need bucket loads of intentional karmic seeds of not killing. But look how often in a day you make a decision to not kill. Only when you meet the cockroach. Only when you eat your ex-boyfriend. Only when you refrain from killing your mother or something. It's only when you have the thought, I will not kill, that you sow the seed of not killing. So it's not that often. And even anyway, our virtue is so weak that the seeds of non-killing that we do are so weak because our virtue is not weak and our intentions are not that strong. Whereas if you have a vow not to kill, this is what they say in the Buddhist teachings, 24 hours a day that you've got it, 24 hours a day, even when you're not thinking about it, even when you're in the pub getting drunk, you might be breaking a vow of not killing. You might be breaking your vow not to have alcohol, but you're keeping your vow of not killing. 24 hours a day, you're keeping it. You're ticking over virtuous karmic seeds. You're purifying your mind, and you're digging this groove deep in your mind. So you can't get ahead without living in vows, basically, the Buddhism says. It's like the easiest way to practice, the quickest way to accumulate lots of virtuous karmic seeds, and the quickest way to purify your mind. So by the time you take refuge, you live in vows, and you do the purification. Even if you do no more, you have a blissful practice. You can put your feet up and eat popcorn and watch telly all day. All right?
It kind of seems too easy, though, doesn't it? Because
yes, nothing wrong with easy.
I've got my feet up and I'm not killing anyone.
That's
then
right.
It's
wonderful. Aren't you intelligent? Well done, Miffy. Don't put down easy. Easy is great.
Right, so that's a whole new take on being a couch potato then. I can be a meritorious couch potato.
There you go. Perfect. Nothing wrong. Be happy with quick, easy methods. What else?
So Paula Shaw asks, what happens to the mind when one becomes a Buddha?
As I said before, Paula, your mind now is completely unencumbered by all the junk. It pervades. I mean, right now, look at our mind. It's not physical as well, but it's stuck in this bag of bones, isn't it? We can't see past our own nose. We don't remember 99% of today. And it's probably only about 2 o'clock over there in Australia. Because we live at a conceptual level. We live at the grossest level of conceptuality, which is not even very valid knowledge. I never got into talking about conceptuality much. But it's not even a very valid level of knowledge. It's very intellectual and abstract. It's very bizarre how conceptuality works. In fact, it's very fascinating. Paul's got another question. No, Pauline's got another question. We'll come in a minute, Pauline. So the thing is, our mind anyway is not physical, but it's locked in this body due to past karma, past habits, and past intense attachment. But as you lessen the attachment and give up all the rubbish and develop compassion and realize emptiness, you're literally, as you're doing this, you're expanding your consciousness beyond this pathetic body. You then get clairvoyance, and this is nothing special. This has been around for 3,000 years, this concept of clairvoyance. Of course, we don't know anything about it in our culture. It's like this weird hippie-trippy thing, remembering you're an Egyptian princess 42 lives ago. I mean, this clairvoyance is crystal clear clairvoyance. Lama Yeshe talks about it beautifully in his Mahamudra teachings, when we've got single point of concentration. We've got incredible clarity, incredible bliss, incredible, unbelievably brilliant mind. You can't imagine how brilliant. And this is our capability. So as you're expanding our mind, Paula, all the time, then as you progress in your spiritual practice, your mind literally gets more and more powerful. You see more and more of the past, more and more the future, more and more the minds of others, until eventually you're fully developed. And of course it sounds like science fiction to us. All I'm going to do is tell you the Buddhist teachings. It's up to you to decide what to do with it. Your consciousness will be wherever there is existence. How can something not physical be confined by space or time or matter? Finally, if it's unencumbered by all the rubbish, it literally pervades wherever there is existence. You see all the minds of all beings perfectly. You're totally, the real meaning of the word Buddha is that mind, unmanifest, all-knowing, all-pervasive, all-compassionate, all-wise. So, but what has motivated you to become a Buddha, Paula, all these countless lives, is your incredible compassion for suffering sentient beings, your unbelievable compassion for sentient beings. So once you've achieved Buddhahood, and even well before that, you don't just wait till then, already even as a bodhisattva who's a learning Buddha, already you could manifest your mind in many bodies. You're going to take this opportunity all the time until when you're a Buddha, you're continually manifesting in bodies throughout space to benefit sentient beings. It's your job. No choice. As long as there is suffering sentient beings, you're manifesting to benefit them. That's what you're a very busy person as a Buddha, okay? You don't just sit around twiddling your thumbs. What else?
Pauline, about asking about living in the vows, that it's difficult for us maybe because culturally we don't understand the significance. We can't see clairvoyantly about it.
So then, question? So maybe the question is, what would motivate us to want to live in vows? Well, yes. The only reason to want to live in a vow is you have to see some benefit. First, you see some benefit to yourself. So if you have the view of karma, because vows are rooted in the understanding of karma, that if you do have at least a theoretical presentation of karma in your head, and you like the idea of programming yourself to not kill, not lie, not steal, because you want to be happy and not suffer, that's a pretty good reason to live in vows. What else? And no one needs to know. It's your private business. No one needs to know. That would be the reason to do it. You wouldn't just do it because someone said. That's not enough. You do it because you have confidence in this. You have confidence that you don't want future suffering. You have confidence, and with compassion as well, surely. You don't want to kill, lie, steal. But know that you're programming your own mind with those marvelous tendencies to not kill, not steal, not lie. And that's a major part of your practice, which then makes it easier for you to do the actual job of being your own therapist and unpacking and unraveling the delusions, which are the thing that cause you all the suffering. So it's got to be the strong wish to benefit yourself, and that's the reason you do it. But also, as Lama Zopa says, the rats and the cockroaches will also be happy because you leave them in peace. They'll have a party. But you're the main beneficiary of living in vows and abiding by the laws of karma. We must remember that. It's very powerful.
And so then, Venerable, would you say that the Buddhist approach then is to have our ethical practice really come from the inside, like not because Buddha said or this person or that person said?
Well, that's the wrong reason to do it. It won't last enough. You just get full of fear and misery. If you just do it because someone told you, that's how we do everything right now. We do mummy said, daddy said, God said, judge said, police said. No wonder we're demented. No wonder we're miserable. It's not enough logic. We've got to do it we've got to know it from internally. We must do that. Have our own continuity, have our own reasoning for our benefit, and so that we can also grow ourselves spiritually. Absolutely, we've got to have that. Then we have confidence. We're the boss. Buddha's not the boss. We're the boss.
You have to start having a huge amount of responsibility then.
That's what it is. You absolutely become accountable. You know that you're the boss. My mother used to say, my Catholic mother, virtue has its own rewards. That's what Buddha's saying. We're so addicted to the view that if I'm seen to be a good girl, I'll get rewarded. And if I'm seen to be naughty, I'll get punished, which is why we try to get away with things. I mean, it's literally schizophrenic. That's like really believing that when you come home from your doctor telling you shouldn't eat sugar, oh, look, she's not here. She won't know I'm eating sugar. I won't get diabetes. I mean, people will laugh at your idiocy. That's our view of morality now. No wonder we're miserable. You've got to be internalized, got to be confident. And once you're confident that sugar will harm you, you will not eat sugar. You don't care how many people tell you not to eat sugar. It's got nothing to do with it. It's confidence. You're accountable. You grow up and you stop being a victim. You give up attachment, you give up anger, you give up blaming. I mean, the view of karma is very amazing. And vows is a way of expressing it, that's all. It's accountability, grown up. We become grown up. Then, got a whole hour yet, look.
No.
All these endless questions from you people.
So far, that is it.
Okay, good.
Yep, that's it for the questions for the moment.
So what do you want to talk about? What topic shall we go into before my voice runs out?
Well, I was also just thinking about
Conceptuality, please, says Rachel.
Conceptuality. There you go. Thank you, Rachel.
Well, you see, this is a point. We've got these two different ways of this is the epistemological model of the mind in Buddhism. And there's two different ways our mind cognizes. So first of all, we have sensory consciousness. And of course, like I said already, we give enormous power to our senses. You know, this really is a powerful point. To really get this is very sobering. Because we only think that I am the body. This is me, you know. And I see a cake out there on the plate. And I've got attachment to cakes. And it's all ingrained. It's all automatic because I've programmed myself. And I really believe, you know, this attachment believes when I get the cake, I'll get happy. The attachment believes the cake is really delicious. It makes it look delicious. So I just shove it in the mouth mindlessly, right? So we will say, oh, look at that delicious cake. Look at that delicious cake, we'll say. And it's true, the senses are very powerful. And, you know, but the eye consciousness can do, all the eye consciousness is capable of cognizing is precisely two things, shape and colour. Ear consciousness does not hear blissful Miles Davis, you know. I mean, I've got some carnations here, and I've put them in a vase. Now I've got a house where I'm living in. For 20 years, I haven't stayed in one place for more than I have now. I've been in like 3 months, I can't believe it. I'm even arranging flowers in vases. I go to supermarket shopping and buy flowers. I've never done that in my life. So I look at the carnations, and because I put them there, I'm attached to them, you know, and I go, they look beautiful. So it's curious because they do. But what we've got to analyze the different parts of our mind that are the thousands of parts of our mind, and not talking brain here. That's still a brilliant science. We're talking the actual cognitive, not physical, experiential process itself, how it functions. That's the Buddha's expertise. So eye consciousness can merely see shape and color. There's a million parts of our mind working so ingeniously together and so quickly together. For example, you've got when you study the Buddhist model of the mind, there's different, you know, there's the negative states, positive states, and then these ones that I like to call the mechanics of the mind. So there's a whole bunch of them. So right now, you know, my eye goes over there. I see the carnations. So first of all, my eye sees shape and colour. That's all. It sees shape and colour. It doesn't know it's seeing pink. It doesn't know it's seeing that pointy things and flat, you know. It just knows shape and colour. So in a millionth of a second, quicker than Google, it accesses my mental consciousness. So now the mental consciousness has two ways of functioning. There's a level that we live at, which is a really deluded, gross level, and that's conceptuality. And this is a surprise to us because we don't think there's any other way of cognizing things. We've got a subtle level which is not conceptuality, but which is, they call it direct cognition. There's nothing in between. This is so hard to hear because we don't think of it this way. So conceptuality, which is the grosser level of our mental consciousness, then what's happened is, quicker than Google, the millisecond my eyes land over there, and that shape and colour, it's implanted in my mind, I recognize it, and then in a millisecond, all these other parts of my mind are all working overtime. So if I've got, there are five always present states of mind. That at any one of these missing, you'd be insane. You'd be a demented person. You would not function in the world. So one of those is intention. That is I will, volition. One is attention. So I go there and intention, and then attention, I pay attention. And then the next is discrimination. This is a hugely important one. This is happening every millisecond. So discrimination, which is a conceptual thought, is an ability to distinguish the pink from the green, the stalk. It sorts out in my mental consciousness what it is. It's called a carnation, and that all of those, and then there's others there as well, many others as well. But just even those three, they're all playing a role every second. So then, but what's happening broadly, the mental consciousness has got these memories in it, billions of memories, and not just from this life, but from past life, but anything I've learned in this life. So within a millisecond, quicker than Google, out of my mouth will come, oh, look at those pretty carnations. But it seems like a simple thing. I think my eyes are seeing pretty carnations. My eyes cannot see pretty carnations. There's a series of conceptual stories in my mind. The memory that it's a carnation, the discrimination that that's green, that's pink, the discrimination that's a carnation and not a rose. There's brilliant parts of our mind all working overtime, all working together perfectly. The 5 fingers work perfectly to pick something up. The bits of our mind working perfectly. And there's many, many, many parts. It's so sophisticated. And this is all conceptuality. Forget the senses. This is the conceptuality. And what they are a bunch of concepts. They're a bunch of opinions. So it's an opinion, and now Buddha puts those opinions into 2 categories. There are those that are virtuous, valid, reasonable opinions, and a valid opinion, a valid cognition in this concept. A valid concept is a thought that's in sync with some reality that we have agreed upon conventionally. So in our world, we've agreed, in English, the sound carnation is referring to that flower. We've agreed, on that. We've agreed that that's pink. We've agreed that the stalk is green. We've got all these agreements. It's not just knowledge coming from the sky. We've agreed. So that's conventional reality. This is a point for Uri. Conventional reality is how things exist conventionally, and that is by agreement. We have agreed. Now, if you think that's a rose, we're going to have an argument, aren't we? So we've got to establish what is true. This is conventional reality. Conventional reality shouldn't be so difficult to prove. It's nothing absolute. It's nothing kind of cosmic. We agree that that kind of flower with that kind of stem, that kind of petal, it's called in English a carnation. You can think it's a rose as much as you like, but it's not called a rose. We agree another one is called a rose. So this kind of knowledge we call science. We all agree on our terminology. We agree that 1 + 1 is 2. That's a conventional truth, and it functions that way. So we're all holding this conventional reality in the sky with our belief system. It's all belief, but as long as it functions, it's okay, it works. But this is conceptuality, and it's a really gross level of cognition. We don't have a direct cognition of a carnation at all. It's a story our mind is made up. It's based upon a thing in that vase over there, and this is how the mind works. This is fascinating. As soon as what happens is with conceptuality, which is how we're functioning all day, what happens is this. My eyes go over there, see shape and colour. It's another way that works, another way the process works. My eye goes over and sees shape and colour. And what happens is this. Every single tiny thing that I know about in the universe will first arise in my mind as a thought. In other words, every single thing that I've known about that is not a carnation will arise in my mind, non-carnation, and then I will eliminate all of those, and then the final thought I'll come up with is non-carnation. And guess what non-carnation refers to? A carnation. So the mind is conceptuality works completely abstractly, completely in a negating, bizarre, abstract, amazing way. Of course, we don't notice that. We just think we see a carnation. No, we don't.
Venerable Robina, that's so identical to what science says about how we recognize people by their face, that we actually in minuscule seconds go through everybody that somebody is not. We get.
That's exactly what the Buddhist psychological model says, how we do we recognize every single thing like that. And it's quicker. I mean, when Lama Yesi said you've got clairvoyance, and this is the subtlest level of your mind. This is non-conceptual. We don't even posit that level of concept. We don't posit a level of non-conceptuality in our mental consciousness in modern psychology, because it doesn't need a brain to function. Your brain is not functioning at that point. Your senses are not functioning. When you've got single point of concentration, you're at a subtle level of cognition, and then you have the direct perception, not conceptuality. That's when you can cognize things directly. You can see the reality of something. And this is not easy to hear because we don't have that level. But that's exactly how the conceptuality works. And we're living like that. So in other words, all we have in the mind with conceptuality is a mental image. We only cognize a mental image. We don't cognize a carnation at all. It's really much more sophisticated than that. It's utterly fascinating. And Western science would be fascinated to study it if they had bothered to think that it could be possible that it's not the brain. It's very interesting. It's very amazing. It's all in the Buddhist psychological. And this book of Lama, of Geshe Tashi in London, he was in London, it's very helpful, called Buddhist Psychology. It's a series of his books, and he talks about it in a very simple way. He presents it in a very simple way. For us, peanuts in the West. So really to break down how the mind functions is very, very, very fascinating. And really, it's crucial. There's the epistemological model, the way conceptuality works and everything. But then there's the psychological model, and to break down all the components of our mind, the thousands of the parts of the mind, and how they all work together. And then the crucial thing is finally, and this is the point about reality, Buddha's telling us that the function of all the delusions, they are conceptual stories, but they're misconceptions. And that's what's hard to see. You can have valid concepts. Love is a valid concept. It's based in reality. It's based on interdependence. You have a connection with another person. You see them person. You want them to be happy. Compassion is empathy with their suffering. You want them not to suffer. Thank you. Yes, foundation of Buddhist thought. That's exactly right. From Langri Tangpa, there it is. So, so we at least start with controlling the body and speech, which are the servants of the delusions. Then we start to unpack and unravel the delusions and distinguish them from the valid states of mind. And we begin to less attached, less angry. But the crucial one is to see how they're liars. And this is really fascinating. So the deepest lie is Uri's question, other people's question. Ego grasping, ignorance, the root delusion that informs all the others. That lie is about the very ontological status of things itself. It's the deepest lie. So attachment sees the carnation and makes it, because I put them there, so I'm attached to my flower arrangement. I keep looking at my flowers, So my attachment over-exaggerates the deliciousness of that flower arrangement over there in the crystal vase next to Tara statue. I know you can't see it, but never mind. So my attachment over-exaggerates the deliciousness of carnations. When the carnations die, and they will, then the floppy old sad carnations, my aversion then over-exaggerates the ugliness of the old floppy carnations. So, but ego grasping, which is embedded, which is underpinning those two delusions, what that does is over-exaggerate the very ontological status of delicious carnations or ugly drooping carnations. So that's embedded in every other delusion. It's there, and it makes it appear over there in the vase from its own side, having nothing to do with me observing it. I'm like this separate, absolute me here, observing delicious carnations over there. That's the way ego grasping causes everything to appear. So, this is where Lama Zopa talks about. This is a wonderful book coming out soon that's Lama Zopa asked me to put together about 100 of his letters to prisoners. They're all written to him at different times. So I've sort of put them together and made a book about it, a book of them, but as a narrative, not as letters. And it's being published by Nick Rebush, and it's going to be put out there as a fundraiser for the prison project. I'll do it. I'm funding it. So it's an amazing book, and in there is an amazing one prisoner Rinpoche writes letters to many, to people. He's got sometimes at any given point, Holly, his attendant said that he's got any given time, he's got a folder of 2,000 letters, So, and he will spend hours if he has to. So prisoners get a 3 or 4 page letter if they write to him, and one guy got 45 pages. It was unbelievable. And the detailed description of attachment and the detailed description about emptiness was very fascinating. So anyway, I think some of it's in the book, in the course notes. So anyway, the final way to understand emptiness, and I think it's not that difficult to prove, is that everything it's all from projection from our mind. In other words, he uses a simple example. When you first learn the alphabet, you don't know how to write. You've never heard of A before and B and C, So you see on the blackboard, the teacher puts, or the whiteboard these days, whatever they use, puts a design, a slanting one, another slanting one, and one in the middle. It's just a shape, it's a design, 3 lines. So you've never heard of A before. So the teacher says, this is A. And you learn it. Then she tells you B, and so you gradually learn it. So what happens is this. In the beginning, it's really clear. You that there's just a design. And then she says, we all agreed in our culture, the sound coming out the mouth called A is what refers to that shape. So very quickly we learn it, and then we forget, because of delusions, because of ego grasping, we forget that we called it A, that we are buying into this agreement. It's a conventional agreement that that shape is called A. But very soon, because of ignorance, we forget that we called it A, we forget that we bought into it as meaning A, and then we think that A is in those letters. And we are just this innocent victim watching it. Oh, look at that, there's A. So that's what it means, seeing it existing from its own side. We think the A comes from those three letters. No, A comes from our mind, and we impute that meaning on those three lines. We can see we do that, but we forget. And that's when we realize that, which seems so simple. Then we realize emptiness. Everything comes from the mind. Nothing has any meaning. Nothing has any meaning. I mean, look at what happens when you have bad memory. Look at what happens when you have bad memory. You forget all those things. So then where's the A? I mean, this is the point, that if it were intrinsic, this is what the Buddha says, if A is in the bones of that design, whoever saw it would know it was A. Like the design would be saying, hello, I'm A. And you'd never need to learn it. We would know everything. But it's not that complicated. I mean, I always think of a prison. When you first establish, you learn to look into the meaning of things. When we learn in the world, we learn the meaning of things. We learn that's A. We learn, what's that building, Mummy? Why is all that wire on top of that wall? Oh, darling, that's called a prison. Well, what's a prison? So she will give me a definition of a prison. The first definition, the first part of the definition, there's two parts, will tell me the conventional reality of it. It says, you can see it's pretty ugly, she'll tell me, the lousy architects with wire on the wall, very high walls. It's this big building, ugly building. That's the first part of it, if you like. And what's its purpose, Mummy? What is a prison? She wants this. I want the second part of the definition, which is what is it in it? What is its function? What's its meaning? What is it? Sweetheart, it's a place you're sent when you're naughty and you can't escape. That's a pretty good definition of a prison. Now, nobody wants to go to there. Now, but let's say in some countries, I remember one guy in Norway writing to me about, he said he was really looking forward to going to a prison for a couple of years. He was really looking forward to it because it was this wonderful prison out in the country. They had education. They want to improve him. It's all free. He's going to do some study. I mean, it's a nice place to go in Norway, but I mean, the further south you get, wow. I mean, prisons in America are pretty disgusting. In Australia, they're not too bad. Not as bad as America. I have to tell you that in my experience. Never mind, whatever it is. Prison, though, is not a place you want to go. If you read about a free room in a prison, you wouldn't want to go there in the real estate pages. Why? Because of the concept. But if, so then if you somebody that's never heard of prison, this is my point. If somebody's never heard of prison, never heard of the concept of being imprisoned and locked in, and you are homeless, and somebody's, I've got a free room for you, and they take you in the car, and they open the gate, and they drive you in, and you go, and you're given your key, and there's your room. You'd be so happy. You'd be so happy. My God, I've got a free room. I can't believe it. And you don't like going out to walk, so you don't care if you're locked in. You're not worried. But so the burden of being in a prison is the concept of it. Usually they're also pretty ugly and the food's pretty disgusting. I'll tell you that as well. But I mean, it was a nice prison. Who wouldn't want to go there? But it's the concept that we have put onto that building. And that is not in the bricks. You won't find the prison in the bricks. You won't find the prison in the wardens. You won't find the prison in the barbed wire. It's a story, but the point is this, it doesn't mean it's all made by the mind. When we think that, we become nihilistic. Oh, well, it's all made by the mind, so it doesn't matter. No, this is where the two truths are grounded together. It has nothing from its own side. There's no prison from its own side. You will not find intrinsic prison in the bricks, the wardens, the windows, the cellmates, the death row unit, nothing. But what is a prison? It still functions exactly as it is defined. So that's the two truths together. It does function as A. Those three shapes do function as A, but you won't find A there. It's the two truths together. Emptiness and dependent arising together. Then you'll never become nihilistic. So everything is coming from the mind. And Buddha's saying over eons and eons of lifetimes of habit, profound habit. That's exactly why if you understand karma, Susanna, you can relax. You just sow the seeds, baby, and the fruits will come. Because we have created everything in the universe. All our suffering, we have created. All our happiness, we have created. So if you want a nice garden and you want roses and oak trees, all you got to do is learn what are the methods, sow the seeds and do the right thing, give it a bit of nourishment, and you'll get your oak tree. You'll get your roses. If you want to be miserable and be living in the lower realms and be killed and lied to and stolen from, keep lying, Susanna. Keep cheating on your husband. Keep being mean to him, and you'll get the results, babe. It's a natural, logical law. And it's completely rooted in emptiness. It's dependent arising.
So, Venerable, is this why then, say, for instance, in Victoria, where there's been quite a extreme lockdown, so many people have been saying they feel like they're in prison, whereas actually they're in their own house and they
That's
still,
right.
you know, but the feeling is that.
I know, but it just proves your mind makes it up. I'm locked in my house. I don't even walk outside. Unless I go to the supermarket. Charmaine comes for me. I went today for half an hour. That's it. I might stay here for 1 week and I don't even walk out I've got a lovely backyard with a peach tree with nice things. I've got a few ants. I feed the ants in the morning, make sure it's outside. I do my practice. I don't even open my front door. I've got nice AC. It's 100 degrees out there. I couldn't care less. So it shows it's your mind. I couldn't care less. I'm completely not bored. I've got my jobs to do. I've got my carnations. I've got a nice house that Charmaine's given me. I've got my jobs to do. I've got my Zooms. I don't even open my front door. I can be here for 2 weeks. I couldn't care. So there you go. It just shows it's the mind, isn't it? Okay, if my house was ugly and if my house had no AC, I'd be complaining. So aren't I fortunate? I've got a nice situation. So this is why I'm not trying to say I'm so holy, I'm just lazy, really. But I mean, this is why, the Buddhist approach, if you work on your mind, and maybe I can do a little bit of working on my mind, a little bit, then you don't go crazy. That's why my friends in prison, who I've had such admiration for, living in these garbage dumps, especially those who've been wrongly accused, they've got a happy mind because they've changed their minds. Because we don't know how to work on our minds. That's why we all go crazy. So we have to, because we can't get what attachment wants every second. That's why we all go nuts. So I go stir crazy, they say, because we want attachment all the time, a new object every second. Give me this, give me that, give me this, give me that, Then we think that's happiness. We're going to drive here, go there, go to the movie, go up, go down, go in, go out. I mean, I'm just the same. I do around my house. I do walking though. I walk I can walk 1.5 kilometres a day around my table. I've got Tara statue and my computer, so I do circumambulation, and that's very good exercise. I'm fine. Anyway, blah blah. I'm raving on now. Sorry about myself.
So, Venerable, then we can feel like everything is okay, whilst we can keep on just changing things around. And it's just when we can't change it anymore, like the AC breaks or we have to stay home.
That's the thing. I'm telling you how happy I am, but guarantee you, if my AC didn't work, I'd be stressed. So this shows when attachment gets what it wants. That's why we fool ourselves into thinking, oh, I'm happy, aren't I happy? It's easy to be happy when your attachment gets what it wants. The test is when you can't get it and you can still stay happy. That's the real sign of success, when we can adjust our mind to the conditions and accept it. Buddha says you can change it, honey, please change it. If you can't, then why worry? And that's pretty profound. So I'm sort of showing off, but I'm not really showing off because, I've got nice AC, so I'm content. And I'll have nice warmth in the winter when the floor heats up because it gets cold here with lots of snow. So yeah, it's because we can't see that we're driven by attachment. And that's why we're so brilliant in our culture, in our cities, in our, modern Australia or modern America, where you're in cities, you can get what you want 24 hours a day. It's unbelievably blissful, isn't it? So you can never get bored. You go, I never forget when I first went to live in New York in 1974, I was blissed out. Living down in the village, and at 3 a.m, you go to Washington Park, and the people are playing guitars, the shops are open all day and night. I was so excited because, and that's just the manifestation of attachment. We can get what you want when you want. And that's what we think happiness is. And it is happiness. But the tragedy is it's unstable because the moment you can't get what you want, which is what's happening now, we have a mental breakdown. So it shows that our happiness is too unstable. Buddha's not being fundamentalist. He's not saying we shouldn't enjoy cakes and changing things, but we have to realize the happiness we get now is only because we're getting what we want. When we don't get what we want, we get angry, and that's samsara. When we can change our mind, then you can have your cake and you can eat it too. Then you've got both worlds. And then if your things go bad, you can still be happy. That's the practice. And then that's easy then to realize they have no intrinsic nature, and that's when you really get happy.
There was one question from Paula Shaw. What's the difference between clairvoyance and conceptuality?
Wow. Conceptuality is a very gross level of consciousness that just thinks about things and has mental images. And clairvoyance is the capacity of the mind at a subtler level, which is beyond conceptuality and beyond the sensory, which, as I keep saying, is not a level of consciousness we posit as existing in modern psychology. It's a subtler level of mind that you would accomplish when you got it properly, not just moments of, clairvoyance, how we think about it in the West. We have a flash. But when your mind is at this subtle level, let me read you from Lama Yeshe. This is much better than my words. I'll read you Lama Yeshe in his Mahamudra. It's very fascinating. Is it available in Australia, maybe, Mahamudra? I hope so.
Yes, it is.
You must
have
already. It in your bookstore. Yep. I hope so. Okay.
And I think also available from Wisdom Publications as an ebook.
Certainly is that, yes. It's not in your bookstore?
That's a moot point because our bookstore's not open.
Oh, okay. I have to find it first. Mahamudra, where is it? I don't know where it is. Let me just try to find it. I hate the way Apple's library is now. I can never work anything out. Mahamudra. Oh, what is this? I've only got a manuscript. Oh, here we go. Here it is. Okay. So, chapter, all right, chapter, the benefits of Samadhi are incredible. I'll read it out. This is just, Lama Yeshe always had this way of trying to get us excited, to get us to practice.
Oh, just before you start, actually, Sevelin from Melbourne's asking, Venerable, so what would you do if your AC stops working?
I'd call the electrician to come and fix it immediately, wouldn't I? But if all you got to do is practice. That's all. I'd have to practice, wouldn't I? Of course I would. Accepting it and keep the doors open and try and be content being hot. That's all. I've got no choice. I have to do that. So chapter 5, the benefits of Samadhi. Samadhi means concentration, but Lama uses sort of an equivalent with the word shamatha, which is calm abiding, although they're not quite the same, but he uses it like that because he knows that people like the idea of Samadhi. It sounds exciting. So there's two modes of meditation. Hundreds of techniques, but two main ways of meditating. One is called concentration meditation, and the result is known as calm abiding, shamatha in Sanskrit. The other on the basis of that clear, sharp, laser-like focused level of mind, we're able to utilize that microscope of the mind, if you like, to do the second mode of meditation, which enables us to use that laser-like mind is then able to penetrate and do the deconstruction process in order to see clearly how the delusions are liars. And you can do it in any level at all, but particularly when you want to realize emptiness. So the second one is known as insight. And this with a laser-like mind, you then use the method of deconstructing the nonsense in order to penetrate to see the reality of what the mind is or what things are by using logic and analysis. And then you penetrate and you see it clearly and you have an insight into it. We can do that every day in our own mind, So then concentration is this technique that came from the Hindus. It's not even a Buddhist technique. The Hindus invented it. They're geniuses, And it enables us to access a subtle level of our mind. And as I said, it's hard for us to conceptualize that. So when you hear Lama, how he talks, you'll get a sense of the capability of our mind. So without calm abiding, so this book is called Mahamudra. Mahamudra is a Sanskrit term that is referring to a particular kind of meditation for realizing emptiness. It's learning to realize the emptiness of your own mind, not the emptiness of yourself, not the emptiness of a lamp, but the emptiness of your own mind. It's a very particular technique. So to realize, and it's an equivalent word for emptiness. It's a term, never mind that. So then, as I mentioned, to achieve the realization of emptiness, the realization of Mahamudra, the reality of non-duality, we first need to develop calm abiding, this concentration. In fact, it's not possible without it. In other words, to penetrate to this subtle level of reality, because the mistake of ego grasping is so primordially deep, you cannot understand it conceptually. We can have a conceptual understanding, but you won't cut the root of the delusion until you've got the subtle level of mind, because the mistake is so primordial. We must achieve the subtler levels of consciousness, of indestructible one-pointed concentration, which in Sanskrit we call Samadhi. It is difficult to realize non-duality. It's another phrase for emptiness, the way things exist without duality. So it's difficult to realize emptiness, non-duality, not because it's hiding from us, but because our concepts are so thick. In other words, the misconceptions. So we must refine our concepts. We must achieve subtle mindfulness, subtle awareness, and subtle clarity. Otherwise, there is no way we can see the unconscious levels of ego grasping an independent self. Not possible. Samadhi is the source of liberation. Without perfect samadhi, then, there is no way to become liberated from samsara and no way to achieve enlightenment. There is no exception, whether we are Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists. To cut the dualistic view, we need calm abiding. But calm abiding is not enough. On the other hand, some people actually think that this state of samadhi, this one-pointed concentration, is all we need in order to cut ego. But that is wrong. Lama Tsongkhapa reminds us that calm abiding alone is not enough to cut the dualistic view. We also need to develop special insight, or vipassana in Sanskrit. In Tibetan we call it hlak tong, hlak meaning extra and tong meaning seeing. We can interpret this to mean that we go beyond seeing conventional reality and achieve the extra seeing of the universal reality of Mahamudra. In other words, we need the two kinds of meditation together, calm abiding and special insight. The benefits of samadhi are incredible. Nevertheless, even without special insight, the results of samadhi alone are unbelievable, almost unimaginable. When we understand this, when we realize how amazing the results are, we cannot help but to try to develop it. There's no way we become lazy. We'll have much energy and make great effort. We won't even worry about eating. I'll explain some of the benefits. You go beyond sensory and conceptual consciousness. As your concentration develops, this will take you, even the most advanced practitioners could take several years. I always quote the example of Venerable Rene, our wonderful Swiss monk. I don't think he's ever been to Australia, I'm not sure. He's been a meditator for 45 years, a serious, full-on professional meditator. And I interviewed him in 1995 in Mandalay after his 2.5-year retreat, one of his first main big retreats, I think, to try to get single-pointed concentration. And in the text, it's described in terms of 9 stages of cultivation of this gradual subtlety, of mind. And he said maybe in that 2.5 years he touched upon the fifth of the 9 stages. And already you could tell from his interview that it was extraordinary, the clarity, the absolute serenity of the mind, the absolute clarity of the mind, the joy of the mind, the stability. It's hard for us to conceptualize this because we do not have any equivalent techniques in our modern world, nothing similar, not at all. Right. Your mind will become, as you go beyond, as your concentration develops, you will go beyond your body. Your mind will become non-conceptual, so it becomes easy to cut the complex world of the 5 sense objects, to eliminate the superstitions. It's another word Lama often use for the delusions, because a delusion is believing in something that doesn't exist, and that's exactly what superstition means, isn't it? And in such a unified state, your mind becomes so subtle, so sharp, you can easily eradicate the complex dualistic thoughts. You can touch reality. This is the feature of samadhi. And out of meditation, you can easily deal with your delusions. They are so light, you can stop them immediately. You experience bliss. In the subtle state of concentration, you experience bliss, ecstatic bliss. Lama's not joking, just naturally. This is the point that's outrageous about Buddha's view of the mind. The level we function at now, first conceptuality, which is the part of our mind that functions through the physical body. And we know it's like walking around with a bunch of lead, isn't it? You know? The body feels so heavy, it drags our mind down. And then we've got mental consciousness, all these conceptual stories, and we have completely uncontrolled thoughts. And we in our culture think it's normal. We don't have any methods to try and subdue the thoughts, except to go to sleep or take a drug. So the mind is exhausting for us. We're completely exhausted, you know. So when we've got concentration, even some semblance of it, what you have is complete, total, effortless control over every tiny thought. I mean, this is insane, isn't it, to think it's possible? Not just for a minute, but continually. It's just your capability. And you can effortlessly see every millisecond of what's going on in your mind, and you can completely reconfigure what's going on. You know, you're totally in charge of your mind. This is astonishing. Who's ever heard? This has been around for 3,000 years, people. And what do we know? We think we're so clever, us arrogant Westerners. We think we've, invented the universe. These idiot Buddhists and idiot Hindus, we have no idea what they've discovered. It's astonishing, and it's now becoming more known in the West. It's incredible. It's amazing. And people are actually practicing it. The more concentration you have, the more integrated you are, and thus the more rapture. Lama uses these words, the more rapture, the more bliss. He means it, that you experience. And this is the point that René said. He said there was no question that even just touching him on the 5th of these 9 stages, it took him 2.5 years, the joy that his mind experienced, he was being very humble, the joy that his mind experienced was so superior to any joy he'd ever experienced through his senses. And this is the point that Buddha's making. We don't even touch upon our mind. We just live in this body, and we are craving like junkies to have pleasant feelings, because getting cake, getting the nice AC, getting the nice visual things. We're such junkies. And the pleasure we do have doesn't last. It doesn't last more than a second. We've got to try another carnation and another cake and another boy. And we keep trying to get another bit of pleasure, and it disappears again down the toilet. And then we're exhausted, got to wake up in the morning, then we've got to go to the toilet, then we do it again. I mean, it's desperate how we try to get pleasure. Buddha's telling us, honey child, you have no idea the capacity of your mind for just joy itself without a sense object. So that's what René said. The joy he experienced, and this is the point, because the mind's more subdued, this joy is also completely peaceful. Even when you're just thirsty for a drink of water, your mind's berserk, isn't it? I mean, look at pleasure that we have that we call really divine. If you talk about rapture, you go mad, you scream and shout and yell, and we're completely berserk, because it's based on attachment, based on this gross body. It's not being fundamentalist. It's not being religious. Buddha just pointed out, has discovered the power of our mind. And this is just something that the Hindus found. This is not even enlightenment yet. This is not even emptiness yet. It's just our own mind. It's amazing capacity for clarity and brilliance and wisdom. Incredible. In the beginning, the bliss you experience is physical, which is more gross, But as your concentration deepens, as you throw off the layers of blankets of grosser consciousness, you experience bliss exclusively at the mental level. This is because you've stopped perceiving all the objects of the 5 senses. Your senses have ceased. I mean, our senses cease every night, and we snore, because we haven't learned how to access a subtle level of our mental consciousness. All the contradictory concepts have disappeared. Your mind is now crystal clear. As if you could count every atom. As your concentration gets stronger and you reach ever subtler levels, your mind becomes super powerful. From his own experience, Lama Tsongkhapa says that you can reach a point of such clarity in your meditation that your mind feels almost infinite. Your mind is so clear, so sharp, it's as if you can distinguish all the subtle physical energies. You'll have the courageous thought, I can count all the atoms of the universe. This level of mind is more powerful than even scientific instruments. And he's not joking, You will have, never mind that one. You'll always be joyful. Can you imagine? What a joke. When you arise from your meditation, you feel liberated instead of uncertain and full of doubts and conflicts. You experience inner peace. You'll always have a happy, joyful vibration. In fact, you continuously experience tremendous pleasure. Now the pleasure of chocolate is nothing to you. When you can now experience with your mind is super. It's like another realm, another dimension. And when your senses do come into contact with their objects, of course, you experience bliss then too. You hardly even notice whether it's day or night. Actually, even now, when you have some samsaric happiness, you have a similar kind of experience. You dance and drink all night, intoxicated with the pleasure. Time just flies. Well, this is what happens when you're intoxicated with the blissful experience of samadhi. And of course, this is real experience. And it's not, if it's based on attachment, you're in big trouble. But it's not based on attachment, because you don't need an object to get the happy feeling. Right now, that's the suffering of our lives. We just assume that happiness, pleasure, rapture, ecstasy are just different terms for levels of pleasant feelings. That's all. And the only way we know this, how to get pleasant feelings, is to have nice sounds, nice smells, nice tastes, nice words, nice eating, nice bed. That's why saying attachment is like being a junkie. And we're all junkies. It's a question of the object and a question of degree. That's all. And because we can't, you see, we don't know how to have a pleasant feeling without eating the cake. I don't know how to have a pleasant feeling, without getting a sensory object. And then we think we're such nice people, aren't we? But we're just lucky. We're due to good karma that we've created so much virtue that we can have AC and heating and food and carnations. And so we think, oh, aren't I fortunate? I'm such a good person. No, you're just a junkie getting junk every second. That's all. So when you can't get the object, you don't get the pleasant feeling. And that's what Buddha says we can accomplish. Our mind is capable of that. And when you practice it in meditation and you lessen the delusions, that's when you get it genuinely. And then when you realize emptiness, you can never lose it. It's your true nature. Your mind is in its nature, is blissful and clear. Virtue is the nature of our mind. Wisdom and clarity are the nature of who we are, And Buddha's got methods to help us access that, accomplish it. That's the point. Your body feels so light. When you are out of meditation, the heavy energy of your body vanishes. Your body feels like a brand new body. You feel so light, almost as if you could fly, almost as if you had no body at all. They talk about when you've really got this incredible concentration, they call it you have a particular mental and physical pliancy. It's like you almost don't have a body. It's almost hard to imagine, because our body dominates our lives, doesn't it? To some extent. Oh, okay. So then you develop clairvoyance. Lama Tsongkhapa says that you will develop clairvoyance. According to the Abhidharma teachings, there are two kinds of clairvoyance. One is what we understand as intuition, an untrained sense that we all have to some extent. For example, you might feel strongly, without any logical proof, that something has happened to your dear friend back home. This is interesting. My sense is the way to talk about this. When we're really deluded, when we're really full of anger and full of depression and full of jealousy, you can't see past your own nose, can you? You're overwhelmed by the presence of your own misery, your own unhappiness, your own suffering, and you see anything in the world is only through the lenses of your own misery. So you have a person could be dying in front of you and you wouldn't even notice. That's how intense the ego grasping is, and that's how intense the delusions are. But they cause us to be completely absorbed in ourselves. So we know ourselves, we can be slightly less neurotic. So then you've got more sense of connectedness with others. And that's what intuition is. You feel a person's pain. That we know that. That's because we're getting a bit closer to our virtues. But if you're overwhelmed by your own misery, you can't see anybody. You can't feel anything because delusions lock you away. So as you get less deluded, you get more connected, more compassionate, more intuition, more intuitive about other people's feelings. It's reasonable. We have a sense of that. But this other one, as Lama says, the other can be gained by training the mind in meditation like we are discussing here. This one, you're able to see long distances as well as other people, including their minds. At first, your experience seems a bit like a dream, but the more your concentration develops, the more clearly you can see, just as you would if you were there in person. This is literally the real meaning of clairvoyance. Some people, in our world, in our culture, you go to a clairvoyant and they have kind of these, occasionally like a sense of something. They see a past life, but it's very random and it's not trained at all. And it's only because you've done some past practice in a past life, you've got access to a little bit of this knowledge. But this can be trained properly, and you have complete clairvoyance. And this, the Buddha would say, you can't really begin to benefit sentient beings until you've got clairvoyance. There's a wonderful story about Lama Yeshe. I'll just finish this and I'll tell you the story. This kind of clairvoyance is not imagining something. It's real, in the present, not a fantasy. And this is the point, because it's a subtler level of mind. You see, the subtle level of mind, like a microscope, can cognize subtler phenomena, which includes the minds of others, which includes the past, it includes the future, and it includes long distances. And we can develop this to a stunning degree as we progress more and more on the spiritual path. It comes hand in hand with developing wisdom, developing compassion, and developing all this amazing knowledge. And we need it to benefit sentient beings. So there's a very lovely story about Lama in Kopan Monastery years ago. Our friend Harry was helping one, this is like in the 80s, early 80s, was helping one of the monks there who was very sick, and he'd found a doctor for the monk. And he happened to mention to Lama Yeshe, because Lama's his guru, so he happened to mention to Lama he'd found the doctor. And Lama just said, no, he doesn't need a doctor. It's okay, leave it. So Harry trusted Lama, and he didn't get a doctor. Well, Harry observed this monk kept getting sicker and sicker, and eventually he was sent up in the mountains, he was a Sherpa, where he died. So then that, if you think about that, that sounds like Lama Yeshe was very cruel. He let the monk get sick and die. But then, so Lama Lundup, who was the abbot, told Harry, well, he said, this is Lama's clairvoyant. I mean, any high being who's got bodhicitta and emptiness, you've got clairvoyance naturally. It's inevitable. Of course you have. It's part of the spiritual progress in Buddhism. It's just part of what your mind's capable of. It fits with it. It just goes like that way, you know. So you get powerful clairvoyance, way more powerful than just getting single point of concentration. As you progress even more, removing the delusions from your mind, you expand your mind. That's the point. So anyway, the whole story is this. Lama Lundup told Harry that because of Lama's clairvoyance, he got emptiness, bodhicitta and everything else, and his only wish is to benefit. It's literally based on compassion. There's no possibility of any ego there. You've got to take that as a given. This person, Lama, was a yogi, great meditator. So Lama, because of his compassion, he could see, because of his wisdom, he could see clearly that this monk, the karma that he'd created in a past life, which was the cause of this sickness, was so heavy, and that if he'd gotten better, he would have had a doctor, he would have gotten better, and his life would have been fine. But he wouldn't have purified this heavy karma. And so next life would have been much, much worse, because the karma wasn't finished. Whereas by having the sickness and by dying, and he died really well, he purified all that karma, next life fantastic. Now, who's got that kind of long-term wisdom? We do not have it, but you need that to really benefit. And that's why any of these great yogis, these great meditators, these great lamas who've done all this work, that's how they can really help you, because they see your mind, they can see 1,000 lives past and in the future, and therefore know exactly how to guide you. You need, we to really begin to benefit sentient beings, we need this kind of wisdom, you know. So of course it's so abstract for our culture, it sounds like mystical, you know, but it completely fits with the whole Buddhist picture. That'll do, get you excited.
Venerable, there is a couple of questions. So one from Uri about how sometimes we can get quite swamped by negative emotions or circumstances that seem to come from outside of us. So absolutely. How does that originate from our mind? Does it?
There are two things going on, Uri. Let's say I'm your girlfriend. Okay, I don't know if you like girls or boys or dogs or who knows, these days it's quite flexible. I'm joking now. But Uri, let's say I'm your girlfriend. All right. And you're in love with me, and I'm in love with you. That means we've got attachment for each other, which means we each look delicious to the other. We rely upon each other. We are dependent upon each other. We are possessive of each other. We expect of each other that we're going to make the other happy. So, of course, we don't think, if we're ordinary people, we don't notice all that. We just think, oh, we're in love with each other, and you're divine. You're going to love me, and I'm divine, and I love you. But then what happens is I start to cheat on you. I start to dislike you. So suddenly, I'm mean to you, and suddenly you're suffering terribly. So what it analyzes, two things going on, Uri. I am being mean to you. People saw it. You can prove that. I was mean to you. You can prove it. I cheated on you. I was mean to you. That's proof. It's fact. But what's your suffering about, Uri? Your suffering is because your attachment didn't get what it wanted. You become angry, despairing, depressed, jealous, upset, freaked out. All of those are the symptom of attachment, and attachment is rooted in the sense of in a wrong sense of I. So the delusions are why you suffer. My actions are right. I did harm you. I'm a wrong person. But you're suffering. Of course, you think your suffering is because of me. Naturally, we all think that. That's why you thought your happiness was because of me. We assume this. We never question our role in it. And this is why Lama Zopa said one time, which is pretty shocking. What's pretty shocking is Lama Zopa said, the universe, the world, and this includes intelligent people, us, we're very intelligent, super intelligent people. But with our view of the mind, we don't go into this too much. So he said the vast majority of all humans on the planet have absolutely no idea that what goes on in our mind plays any role at all. In other words, when I'm if you're the mean one, Uri, and I'm the one who's jealous and freaked out, of course I will completely believe, and our psychology tells it, our neuroscience tells us, it reinforces this belief of ego that you are the cause of my suffering. Now the point is, it doesn't mean you're right. If my mind is the one that's causing my suffering, it doesn't mean your actions are right. You don't get off the hook. You should not cheat on me. You should not be mean to me. It's true, but you were. So that it's true that you do the mean things, but my suffering comes from my attachment not getting what it wants, my anger, my despair, my jealousy. This is the Buddha's analysis, and this is so intensely difficult. That's why I use my examples of my friends in prison. They're living in these garbage dumps. Some of them wrongly accused. And I mean, it's like living in hell. But they've changed their mind so they become happy. This is the whole point the Buddha is saying. It's the whole point. Do you understand, Uri? You get it? It's hard work, honey. Forget about emptiness. This is hard enough work.
Then, Venerable, there is a question.
Hang on. Are you clear, Uri? That's good enough?
Uri said, what a great explanation.
Oh, good. Okay. All right, honey. Well done.
There's a question from Lisbeth about what's the karmic cause and result of suicide. And I was also wondering, with suicide, often there can be like a real insight into the suffering nature of our existence, but that's kind of as far as it gets. So there is possibly a kernel of wisdom there, but
seeing the suffering nature of life. But I mean, it's okay. Any action we do, like we said before, there are 4 things in place for an action to be a complete action. So in this case, well, I forget whether it's a complete action, but an action that we do, there's an intention. I will kill myself, but then we've got to look at the motivation, the reason to do it. This is the point, the reason to do it. So there's a lovely story about the Buddha, one of his past lives. Buddha, before he's a Buddha, but pretty highly developed, must have realized emptiness, got bodhicitta, unbelievable compassion. And there's a story about how he saw this mummy tiger who was starving to death and she was about to eat her babies. So he had such compassion for the mummy tiger that she would create the negative karma of eating her babies that he cut himself and he threw his body down and he offered his body to the tiger. Well, he killed himself basically. But I mean, look at his motivation. I mean, you wouldn't even call that suicide. It was like insane level of unbelievable compassion of offering his body to the mummy tiger, right? So then normally look at our motivation. So first of all, what depression is, or despair, is meaning attachment has been completely destroyed. No longer the happiness is coming. Someone's, we don't even know why we're depressed sometimes, but what depression is internalized aversion. It's internalized build-up of attachment not getting what it wants, and it turns into the deep despair and hopelessness, and we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. So attachment stopped getting what it wanted. We don't even know what it is anymore. We're completely miserable, because we believe it is permanent. It will never change. This is the tragedy. When we've got attachment. That's why I always quote Nicole Kidman. I love Nicole Kidman. I remember reading an interview she was still with Tom Cruise, and she said, we will be together until we're 80. This is the point about attachment. So what that meant was they were together, they had their family, their life, and because attachment's getting what it wants, and this is how we all are, you'll recognize, when attachment is getting what it wants, we are so happy, because we can't stand the thought that happiness will stop, we impose another lie on top of it, and we think it will last forever. This is grasping at everything is unchanging. So then when the bubble burst and Tom left her for Penelope Cruz, she crashed down to despair, and then she couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, she could, she was okay. But that's why we kill ourselves, because we can't see the way out. So the reason it would even arise in your mind to kill yourself is from past imprint. It's the habit in your mind. Some people get very depressed but never think to kill themselves. Some people want to kill themselves all the time because the habit from having done it before. The imprint is in the mind. If it occurs to you to do something, it's because you've done it before. It's very simple. If it doesn't occur to you, because the imprint isn't there. It's very simple. So the imprint is there, and because the depression is there, and the habit, and because you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and then the whole world is seen through the lenses of your despair, and you can see nothing good, and you become obsessed with it. And the only way out is to kill yourself. You think, but the Buddha says it's totally painful to kill yourself because the motivation is lousy. You're not done it out of joy. Your mind will be really depressed and unhappy when you kill yourself, and it'll just cause you to have more suffering in the future. I mean, that's the Buddha's analysis. But when we even realize impermanence, we'll have more hope, we'll have more optimism, you know. But when we think things are permanent, unchanging, that's when we find things unbearable. But things do change. That's why learning about impermanence, uncertainty, then we will learn that things change. When things are bad, they'll change. When things are good, they change. And you become more realistic, more stable, and more confident. What else? Time to go soon.
Yep. Almost, but that's an interesting take on living with uncertainty, that uncertainty can actually be our friend.
That's the point, and that's the whole point about transforming problems into happiness. When we realise everything is uncertain, we won't have... See, one of the functions of attachment is massive grasping expectation. You believe, because you've thought it, you believe it'll happen. Nicole said, we will be together until we're 80. I mean, scientifically, you know it's not true, but because the feeling of when you're happy and the wish for it to last forever, we conflate that with believing that it will last forever, and it's clearly nonsense. It's a fantasy we've made up. This is all the lies our mind makes. So then we think, then we go to the other extreme and we go, well, if he's going to leave me tomorrow, why bother? Why don't I just give up now? No, once we've realized everything is in the nature of impermanence, you will enjoy everything every day, and then you won't have a fantasy expectation. And if Tom is still there tomorrow, it's a bonus. I remember one woman in one class, it was very interesting. She said she's obsessed all the time about her husband, maybe he's going to die. She never stopped thinking about it. And she said to me, well, tell me a method to try and live in the moment. I said, forget about living in the moment. Just realise he will die. Don't pretend he won't. He will die. So get on with life. And when you realise he will die, you won't waste a second of your life. You won't bother thinking about it, because every day he's there, you'll be a bonus. So you'll enjoy it. So when we realise things do change, it's fine. But, it's okay, because change is part of life. But every time it doesn't change, you delight in it. But to live in the fantasy that things shouldn't change, you just live in a nightmare, because things do change. And when do you get upset, That's why we're upset now, because suddenly, how dare COVID-19 come along and upset our life? And of course, because we don't understand karma, we don't realise that we created COVID-19, for God's sake. We blame everybody else. We blame the government. We blame Mr. Andrews if you're in Melbourne. You blame whoever you want to blame. You blame Mr. Trump in America. It's a load of rubbish. It's all due to our past karma, That's why when you realise karma, you don't get angry. You accept it, and then you try to change things if you can. It's more realistic.